So can you tell the difference between these two solar farms? So they're built for the same customer, by the same developer, using the same sorts of panels, but they have very different emissions results. So why buy renewable energy? So most folks are interested in the electricity value, offset their power bills, but they're also interested in the renewable energy credits that let them make their net zero claims, say they're 100% renewable. And it doesn't really matter if that's from solar or wind or any other sorts of tech. So the problem with the current system is, from a sustainability perspective, it doesn't really matter where you produce the power or when you produce it and what you're offsetting on the grid. If you're doing solar instead of gas or solar instead of coal, it all produces the same RECs. And so if you're a buyer of these sorts of projects, what you're really interested in places where it's really easy and profitable to build, so somewhere like Texas or Iowa, or somewhere where the electricity is really valuable, so a state like California, for example. And so these tend to be where we see most of the solar and wind development. But these aren't necessarily the states that need it most from an emissions perspective. If we look at states like Kentucky or West Virginia or Wyoming, these are places that all have really polluting grids, but they're not necessarily the first place you think of for new renewable energy development. And part of the problem is that these states all tend to be down here in the bottom left. So they're places where they have really high emissions coming this way, but the price of power is really low. So if you're someone who's buying a project, you're not necessarily interested in a project in a low power cost state. So a proposed solution to this problem is what's being called emissionality. Essentially, this is where you would get to take credit for the power that you offset on the grid. So if you can cause a gas plant to turn down or a coal plant to retire, you'll be able to take credit for those emission savings. And if you're going to go this route, what really is the priority is getting coal to retire, because coal is twice as polluting on a per megawatt hour basis. So if you're targeting emissions reductions, that gives you twice your bang for your buck compared to getting a gas plant to turn down. But the problem that coal has is that it has these big boilers in the middle of it, and the boilers tend to take a long time to heat up, and once they're hot, they tend to stay hot. And so the power profile from a coal plant is really flat and rectangular, which doesn't line up very well if you're trying to replace it with a solar farm, which doesn't have a very flat, rectangular load shape. And so if we're going to be looking at trying to get coal to retire with solar, we really need to look at adding batteries so that we can flatten out that curve so it looks much more like the production we're getting from a coal facility. So do corporations even care about all this stuff? So at the moment, they're spending hundreds of millions of dollars on things like direct air capture or mineralization or these other things to try to vacuum CO2 out of the air for their sustainability reports. But all these tools are really expensive, and they're really expensive on a per ton basis. These are a bunch of different options for carbon removals. You can ignore all the acronyms. But the point being, they range in cost from $160 a ton all the way up north of $800 a ton. So these are really expensive solutions to this carbon problem. So bringing it together, we've got these renewable energy projects that under some of the new rules will be able to claim credit for their emissions reductions. And we've got these corporate buyers that want alternatives from these really expensive carbon removal projects. So let's take a look at what that might look like in sort of a real world context. So this is the Harding coal plant. It's a coal plant up in Montana. It's terrific, I guess. It produces about 400,000 megawatt hours per year. And if we were to look at the impact that we could achieve by getting it to retire early, what would that look like? Well, it would be the same as if we covered all of Denver with forest, and then we did it 3 more times. And as previously mentioned, the Aptera Reservoir is currently empty. This would save enough water to fill it back up again. It's 20,000 acre feet, the best unit. So if we were to look at retiring this facility, let's say it costs us $100 a megawatt hour to build solar and wind and batteries to replace this project. So for those developers out here, $100 a megawatt is a lot to be paying for some power, but let's say it cost us that much to do it. So just for the value of the carbon that we've been saving, it would only be about $66 a ton if we did this sort of a project. So half as much as anything else. And that's not counting any savings from operations or fuel or any of that stuff. That's just from the value of the carbon alone. And if we look across the country at what their opportunities, we've got the Hardin plant up there in red. And then these are all other coal facilities that could have comparable economics in terms of looking at carbon for retirements. So before all this gets implemented, it's currently being under review. We'll have some public comments come out soon. We need to figure out some exact definitions for additionality. We need to figure out the exact value of sort of variable versus firm generation, and just making sure we're all using the same accounting rules when we're doing this sort of thing. So when we look back at our two first projects at the beginning of this, hopefully soon we'll have some extra incentives to be prioritizing those projects on the right that are having really significant environmental impacts. Not that the one on the left isn't great. It's good. So thanks.